LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 8th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. You can see my topic for the video is Biden's best week, because Biden had a lot of good things go his way, even though he was like in COVID isolation some of the time. But I'll talk about all the specific accomplishments when I get to the 5 news summaries and the newsmaker clips. But first, regarding this big Inflation Reduction Act that just passed the Senate yesterday, I have my political comedy clip, which comes from MSNBC's Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, in which Jonathan and then Jennifer Granholm, Energy Secretary, former Michigan governor and Energy Secretary, discuss what's becoming, I guess, a new political term, though I guess it really dates back to something Vice President Joe Biden said to President Obama that was caught on a hot mic when Obama was signing Obamacare into law, and I'll talk about that some more after we watch that clip together over here.
The Reduction Act isn't the $3 trillion budget for climate change provisions that the president originally wanted, but how much of an impact will the Inflation Reduction Act have in combating climate change?
Well, I mean, you just read, right? 40% reduction in carbon pollution by 2030, 40 plus, depending on which study. And then you combine that with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act investments. That's another $62 billion in climate, which was passed already, in November of last year. Wow, it is the biggest investment in addressing climate change in our nation's history. On top of course, the president's investments in infrastructure, it's really, as you guys have been saying, as we've all been saying, it really is a BFD.
that technical terminology.
It's now a new technical phrase, yes.
The BFD of the IRA in the USA. All right, in all seriousness.
The BFD of the IRA in the USA is the big news over the weekend, but actually there were a lot of things that went Biden's way and the Democrats' way over the last week. I'm going to show you, you'll pretty much get all of it, I think, in the news summaries. The first news summary, the biggest and longest package as usual, comes from Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press, where he does talk about this issue, but he also, they really focus on two things. One, and both of these things are good for the Democrats and good for the Biden administration and good for the Democrats' prospects in the midterm. One is this big surprise in Kansas, where Kansas voters decided to reject an end to the right to privacy and the right to have an abortion in the Kansas state constitution. The Kansas Supreme Court had found that in the Kansas Constitution, and so this was like a constitutional amendment for the state constitution that was on the ballot, and it lost like 59 to 41 in like deep red Kansas, which was a BFD also, to use the new terminology. And then also a lot more Trump-endorsed candidates like the crazies, the extremists in the Republican Party have been winning primaries, and that makes it hopefully easier for Democrats to beat those candidates in the midterms. And so both these issues are good news for Democrats, good news for Biden that happened in the last week. Not all the good news. I'll talk about some more of the good news after we watch the Chuck Todd NBC News Meet the Press news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning. It is fair to say there are two conclusions we can draw from Tuesday's important voting. One is that the history of abortion being more of a motivator for Republicans than for Democrats, maybe just that, history. When Kansas voters defeated an anti-abortion measure by 18 points, they proved the Democrats' theory of the case, that the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision would energize their voters, particularly in the suburbs. Remember, this was Kansas. The issue sparked a massive turnout in a red state with a clear message. Abortion opponents are overreaching. Nobody saw this kind of landslide result coming. The other lesson is that the GOP remains very much Donald Trump's party despite a more robust anti-Trump insurgency. Look no further than Arizona, where the 4 Trump-endorsed election-denying candidates all won their Republican nominations for the top 4 statewide offices. The races may have been closer, but the Trump team won. Are they easier targets for Democrats to take down in November? Perhaps. Yet it also sets up a potential sweep by some far-right candidates who could refuse to certify any victory by any Democrat in 2024 in that state. But we're going to start with that abortion vote earthquake. It was just the latest data point that tells us this: it is time to rethink everything we thought we knew about this November's midterms.
I'm overjoyed.
After an 18-point defeat of the measure that would have stripped abortion rights from the state's constitution, Democrats are hoping to take the post-Roe backlash in conservative Kansas nationwide.
Kansas was just the start. If it's going to happen in Kansas, it's going to happen in a whole lot of states.
Turnout more than doubled recent midterm primaries in Kansas, approaching presidential levels on an issue where Republicans have historically had the enthusiasm advantage.
I'm astounded at the turnout.
Our movement has endured so much over 50 years. This setback is not going to stop us.
Kansas Republican Senator Roger Marshall called the results a gut punch.
It tells us that there were a lot of people interested in the issue in Kansas. There's no question about that.
Already this week, Democratic candidates are making it clear on the airwaves that they're all in.
He supports a total ban.
Even if I'm right.
You make it illegal and you punish the doctors.
Blake Masters, too dangerous for Arizona.
When millions of women lost their right to choose, Higgins celebrated because she wants to make abortion illegal.
Abortion will be directly on the ballot in a handful of states, including battleground Michigan, where a pending ballot measure would enshrine abortion rights with a constitutional amendment. And Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer is trying to make her race against Republican Tudor Dixon a referendum on abortion rights.
Rape, incest, no exceptions except
life in the mother.
Is that you solid there?
That's where I'm solid.
On Friday in Indiana, Governor Eric Holcomb signed a near total ban on abortion. The first state post-Roe to pass sweeping restrictions. The law ends legal abortion completely in Indiana, which has been allowed at up to 22 weeks of pregnancy. But it does include exceptions for the life of the mother, fatal fetal anomalies, and some exceptions for rape and incest, which some Indiana House and Senate Republicans tried to remove completely.
And does this apply to a 5th grader who has been a victim of incest?
It does.
In the end, Indiana Republicans splintered, and they were unsuccessful. Looking to the fall, national Republicans are still counting on inflation in the economy to define the electoral map.
They don't have a plan to solve the inflation that they created.
But as Democrats work to turn individual races into referendums on abortion rights, some Republican candidates, worried about their party's move to the right, are softening their own positions.
No exceptions for rape or incest?
Unless a mother's life is in danger.
But now?
If I've been unclear previously, I want to be clear now. Rape and incest, along with endangering the mother's mental or physical health, are acceptable exceptions.
I don't give way for exceptions either.
The people of Pennsylvania, you decide what abortion looks like. You decide on exceptions.
And joining me now is Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Congresswoman, welcome back to Meet the Press.
And I actually don't have a clip of Nancy Mace talking about the Republican position on abortion, but to summarize, what Republicans are going to try to say is they're extremists on both sides. They're extremists on the pro-life side who want no exceptions, and then there are extremists on the other side who want like abortion all the way up until birth on the left. And we need common sense regulations, and that's what Nancy Mace is for, and that's what, you know, the sensible middle, supposedly some Republicans are trying to say that's where they're going to go. But the abortion up to the ninth month being extreme, when you're talking about a woman and her doctor making a decision as to what's medically necessary in those extreme situations that go into the second and third trimester, that is actually a reasonable position. And the final clip I'm going to show you, clip number 13. If you look down in the video description, I have brief summaries of what all the clips are. Clip number 13, the last one, is going to be the candidate for governor of Georgia, Stacey Abrams, really explaining how allowing medically necessary abortions all the way up until through the third trimester, that is not an extreme position. But I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work politically, but one thing that's not going to work politically for Republicans is trying to take away a woman's right to choose in totality, at least according to the results in Kansas. And like I said, the two things in that news summary that were part of my main topic of Biden's best week, there's these two indicators of good news for the midterms that have been, the midterms have looked like all bad news because of economic problems, inflation, possible recession with the two quarters of economic contraction at the beginning of 2022, the first two quarters. Is that a recession? Is it not a recession? That's hard to say. I always thought 2 quarters of negative growth. That's, us capitalists have to always refer to stuff as growth. So a contraction in the economy isn't contraction, it's negative growth because everything's in terms of growth. But I'm not sure with the great unemployment numbers that came out this week if you could even call this a recession, because recessions mean that people are out of work, and it's just not happening, at least not yet. I guess we'll have to wait one more quarter, and maybe that'll be the decider as to whether Democrats lose a lot of seats in the House in the midterms or keep both the House and the Senate. It seems possible based on the good news this last week, and I'll move on to the next news summary, which is mostly about the Inflation Reduction Act and gives you some details about what's in it, which we're kind of missing from NBC News' Meet the Press. And also, you'll hear, this is CNN's State of the Union, Dana Bash, and then their reporter Manu Raju, who was up all night talking about this weird vote-a-rama process where because it is a bill that can pass with just 50 votes plus the vote of the vice president in the Senate, the reconciliation process, in order to use that process, you have to allow unlimited amendments, which is why they were up all night Saturday night through Sunday afternoon, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of Our Union is, watching the U.S. Senate pull an all-nighter. You are looking at live pictures of the Senate floor where tired lawmakers are still voting after more than 9 hours of all-night debate on the Democrats' sweeping tax, health, and climate package. Saturday, Vice President Kamala Harris cast a tie-breaking vote to help Democrats move forward on the legislation. Right now, Democrats are trying to remain united as Republicans and Bernie Sanders offer up amendments to the bill. I'm going to go straight to Capitol Hill and CNN's chief congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, you have been up all night. You don't look it, but you've been up all night with the senators watching it all unfold. What's the latest?
Yeah, the senators are expecting several more hours of voting after starting the votes at 11:30 p.m. Eastern time last night, going all through the night. And I just walked into the Senate chamber. Senators appear surprisingly energetic, and we expect this to wrap up sometime probably early afternoon. But because of the procedure they are employing here, Democrats are trying to pass this bill along straight party lines. It cannot be filibustered because they're using the budget process. That same process gives senators an endless amount of amendments if they want, limitless, and essentially they can offer amendments until they decide to give up, essentially here. Now, Republicans have offered a series of amendments targeting immigration, the IRS enforcement, as well as energy provisions. Democrats, however, have banded together. They have stuck together and rejected all of the Republican attempts. They even have voted down one of their own. Senator Bernie Sanders has tried to change the bill, including to expand the child tax credit. Democrats voted that down, too, because of their concerns. If this bill is changed in any way, it could upset this delicate compromise and cause some of the moderates in their caucus to revolt. Now, this bill, though, Dana, significant in size and scope, dealing with health care, climate change, increasing the corporate minimum tax, and at the moment on track for passage in the Senate and then onto the House for final passage on Friday, giving Biden a gigantic win here after more than a year of internal Democratic wrangling. Dana.
Manu Raju, thank you. Here with me now for a special joint interview, two senators from either side of the aisle who have come together to pass a surprise.
And that's Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, and Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat. I will actually have a clip of both of them talking about who they support for president in 2024. Dana Bash actually does a pretty good job of cross-examining Lindsey Graham by showing that clip of him like late at night on January 6th, actually into the early morning of January 7th, where he said his journey with Trump was over because of the January 6th insurrection, but now he's still supporting Trump. And then a lot of Democrats say they don't really want Biden to run in 2024. And so I'll show an extended clip of the two of them. That's actually clip number 12, the penultimate clip, where you'll see Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal both try to defend the person most likely to be the presidential nominee for their party in 2024. But I mean, I thought that CNN State of the Union news summary was, fairly journalistic. They described the Dana Bash at the beginning described the Inflation Reduction Act as a tax, health, and climate package. And then Manu Raju described the process of amendments and what was in the package, and even talked about how Bernie Sanders was disgruntled. What you're going to see from Fox News Sunday, as usual, is not that journalistic. It's much more what you would expect from a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. And, of course, as I point out pretty much every week, Fox News is not a journalistic organization. It's a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, which is actually what its founder, Roger Ailes, created it to be, as you would know if you read this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, which is all about how Fox News was founded to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. I spent many of my early years on YouTube creating a Fox News bias playlist proving how it was a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. And their news summary it's not that, Fox News Sunday is one of their more journalistic programs. You'll see, I'm going to show you the full news summary in just a minute, where they say that, Joe Biden got his economic package passed, or almost passed. So they refer to it as an economic package, which isn't, what you see. Mostly they talk about as a tax and spend package. And normally I just show the news summary where whoever the host of Fox News Sunday this week comes on. It used to be Chris Wallace, but he's left, so now they have rotating guest hosts. And they start off the program where they, this is what I'm about to show you. Mike Emanuel comes on and says, "I'm Mike Emanuel," and what are the first words he says about the package? Not that it's about climate change or lowering drug prices or increasing taxes on corporations that make over $1 billion and don't pay taxes. No, it's a tax and spend package. Tax and spend package. So before I show the full Fox News Sunday news summary, I just want to show you that first 10 seconds of Fox News on Sunday over here.
I'm Mike Emanuel. Senate Democrats make their final push toward handing President Biden a tax and spend victory, a year and a half in the making.
It's a tax and spend victory because that's, and sometimes during the week on Fox News, they will do stories that say Biden's tax and spending spree, also Biden's border crisis, America's crime crisis. It's just, they don't even try to do journalism most of the time. They don't try to have a opposing voices. It's just like all anti-Biden all the time. And you can also see it in the Fox News Sunday News Summary. Like I said, they talk about it. It's Democrats' election year economic package, which isn't quite as bad as tax and spend. But then they also really focus on Bernie Sanders, calling it the so-called Inflation Reduction Act because it may or may not reduce inflation. And then the contradiction between the investments in climate change, but also Joe Manchin got some leases for fossil fuels. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. You are looking live at the Senate floor where Democrats have been working through the night to drive their election year economic package toward final passage. In order to do so, they're taking a series of rapid-fire amendment votes in a process called Vote-A-Rama. It's been underway for more than 9 hours. In the 50-50 Senate and without Republican support, they'll likely need Vice President Kamala Harris to cast the tie-breaking vote to send the package to the House of Representatives. In a moment, we will speak with Democratic Senator Ben Cardin. But first, let's turn to Chad Pergram on Capitol Hill with the latest. Chad?
Mike, good morning. Democrats will need all 50 of their senators to pass the bill. So far, they have the votes. That includes Bernie Sanders of Vermont. He will vote yes, but Sanders will do so grudgingly.
I want to take a moment to say a few words about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act that we are debating this evening. And I say so-called, by the way, because according to the CBO and other economic organizations who have studied this bill, it will in fact have a minimal impact on inflation.
Now, Sanders says the bill includes some of the biggest investments ever in clean energy, but he admonished his colleagues for helping the fossil fuel industry. Senators have cast 25 votes throughout the night. Most vote-a-ramas have about 30 or 40 votes and run about 15 hours. Republicans have weaponized votes against Democrats in the voting marathon. The hope is to get Democrats on the record taking bad votes. Now, later today, Vice President Harris will cast a tie-breaking vote to pass the bill. It will be the 293rd tie-breaking vote from a vice president in American history and Harris's 25th tiebreaker. Mike?
Chad Pergram reporting from Capitol Hill. Chad, many thanks.
Thank you.
Joining us now, Democratic Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland. Senator?
And I will have a clip of Democratic Senator Ben Cardin, and at least Mike Emanuel didn't call him Democrat Senator Ben Cardin. That's one of the things that Republicans in Fox News like to do, like pretend that the word Democratic can't be used, like they're all Democrat, not Democratic. They make them into nouns and not adjectives, even when they're adjectives or whatever. That's a whole weird thing I don't quite understand. But I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip in terms of what it didn't tell you, but I actually think this next news summary, even though it's only like a minute and a quarter long, the CBS News Face the Nation news summary from Margaret Brennan, it really emphasizes the most important points about the BFD that the Senate just passed, that it will most likely be passed by the House when it comes back Friday. You know, I was reading the live comments, and I saw Schmoab say the EV credits stink. I hope the House fixes the problems with that. Well, I don't think the House can fix anything, is what I was about to say. This barely passed the Senate after this vote-a-rama with all these amendments and all the Senate Democrats stuck together to get it passed. Now it's got to go back to the House and get passed, or that's it. I mean, the House cannot change this bill, I don't think, to answer what Shmoab said there. But like I said, I think Margaret Brennan not only gets the best cross-examination of Rick Scott, that's clip number 11 coming up later, the third to last clip, or second to last, well, whatever. Clip number 11 of 13 is Margaret Brennan winning the cross-examination award of the Monday Media Mix-Up, but also I think the best news summary that really emphasizes what's important about the Inflation Reduction Act, which isn't the reduction of inflation. It's the biggest investments ever in history in combating climate change and reducing carbon emissions by 40% from, I think, from like the 2006 levels, 2006 levels or 2005 levels, right around there. Like, there's some really good stuff in this bill, and Margaret Brennan really nails it in this brief news summary, the penultimate news summary I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we come on the air, the Senate is poised to make the biggest investment to fight global warming in history, with the hopes of reducing carbon emissions 40% by 2030. This long-stalled bill will now expand credits for the manufacture and purchase of electric vehicles, fund rebates for energy-efficient appliances, allocate money to fight drought in western states, and help vulnerable communities impacted by climate change. The bill also cuts healthcare costs by lowering premiums and extending subsidies, and it caps out-of-pocket Medicare drug costs for seniors at $2,000 a year. To pay for all of that spending, the bill calls for a 15% corporate minimum tax on companies that book income of more than $1 billion a year, and will provide money for the IRS to crack down on tax enforcement. With the Senate split 50-50 between the parties, Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to break the tie, which would give Democrats a much-needed boost headed into the November midterm elections. And we go now to Capitol Hill and Florida Senator Rick Scott, who is...
Yeah, so like I said, I thought that was the best of the news summaries there, and uh-oh, I seem to have lost my clips. Where did my clips go? Yeah, no, I thought that was the best of the news summaries. And what happened to... Hello? I seem to have lost my clip list somehow. I want to play the next clip, which is the final news summary. It's the ABC... What happened here? I don't know what happened here. I've lost my clip list. Well, hold on. I've never had to do this before, but I'm going to have to import the clip list. What I have, ABC was the last news summary that I didn't get to show. What happened there? Something... I don't know what happened here, but... Here is the last of the news summaries. The ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. I don't know what happened there, but I think this is also a good news summary regarding the Inflation Reduction Act, talking about it fighting climate change, reducing drug costs, extending Obamacare, raising taxes on large corporations that don't pay taxes. And it's the final news summary I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here. And now I can't even get it to play. What is going on here? I don't know. Let me try again here. I don't know what happened here, but don't know why I can't play my clips. trying to... Don't know what happened here, but I have one other thing I can try. Let me see what happens if I do this. Okay, I think I got this fixed, and here is the final news summary. ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos doing a pretty good news summary over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, Senate Democrats on the cusp of passing their climate, health care, and tax bill. It cleared a key test vote yesterday. Votes on amendments have continued all through the night. The sweeping legislation funds the largest investment to fight climate change in U.S. history. It lowers prescription drug costs for Medicare, extends Obamacare subsidies, reduces the deficit a bit, and is financed with tax hikes on large corporations. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act. That's something of an open question, as is the impact the legislation will have on the looming midterms, where Republicans are poised for a potential takeover of Congress. Democratic Senator Chris Coons, Republican Mike Rounds are here to discuss it all. And Senator Coons, let's start with you. Good morning. I know you've had a long, long night, not much sleep. You've been voting all through the night. No surprises so far. Any doubt this is going to pass?
Okay, yeah, I got that to work. I don't know what happened, how I lost my clip list. I don't know what happened there, but I had to restart my live streaming software, my Wirecast software, so I apologize for that, for the brief delay there, but it looks like everything is back and working, and that was the last of the 5 news summaries. Like I said, I thought CBS actually did the best of emphasizing what was important, but you can, and Fox News, of course, wasn't even really a news summary because they're not a news organization, but you can tell me how you rank those news summaries. Again, I apologize for that restart gap, but now I'm going to show you the newsmakers, and the first newsmaker I want to show you is who George Stephanopoulos stopped there in the last news summary, talking about Delaware Senator Chris Coons, who you would assume is very close to President Joe Biden, since Joe Biden used to be senator from Delaware, and so they are fellow Delaware Democrats. And I think Chris Coons actually makes the best argument for my title about Biden's best week. I think he mentions pretty much everything in the last week, and then a few other things from the last month that show that maybe this is like Biden's big comeback, the Democrats' big comeback, and I will talk about that with you a little more after we watch Chris Coons talking to George Stephanopoulos about that. And even George Stephanopoulos, well, I guess he is a Democrat, but a former Clinton administration official, but he has to admit that Biden's on a winning streak, which I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Attacking it as a big spending bill, and it appears their midterm strategy is to focus on inflation, tie your candidates to President Biden, whose approval ratings, as you know, are stuck in the 30s. How worried are you that that's going to work? What should President Biden do about it?
I don't think it's going to work, because President Biden and the Democrats in Congress have gotten a whole string of significant accomplishments in recent weeks. President Biden is soon going to sign into law the biggest veterans health care bill we've ever done that deals with burn pit injuries for those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's about to sign the CHIPS package, a bipartisan bill that makes significant investments in onshoring, in bringing back to the United States advanced manufacturing in things like semiconductor chips. He also ordered the strike that killed the leader of al-Qaeda, and recently presided over some great job news, as I just said, and I'm confident this bill will get to his desk. Last point, we just passed here in recent days a guns and mental health bill that's going to invest $13 billion in community mental health. This is a whole string of wins that impact issues that really matter to American families.
It is quite a winning streak at the same time, as you know, and you're one of the president's closest friends in the Senate. He is facing some grumbling, some talk in the Democratic Party that perhaps he should step aside, not run in 2024. Maureen Dowd has a column in the New York Times this morning saying, "Hey, Joe, don't give it a go." She says this winning streak is exactly the right time for the president to step aside, declare victory, and clear the way for a new generation of Democrats. What's your response to that argument?
Well, George, all the Democrats who are coming to these bill signings, I hope, are also going to sign up to continue to support our president. You're right. I was one of the folks who was first in supporting now President Biden when he was candidate Biden, and I think he's done good things for our country. I think he's got a strong record of accomplishment to run on. All the different initiatives I just talked about here at home, but also real leadership on the world stage. He pulled together our NATO allies, our European partners, to stand up to Russian aggression in Ukraine, and he strengthened our alliances in the Indo-Pacific. So frankly, I'm hopeful that President Biden will run again. If he does, I'll certainly support him.
So no doubt, are you encouraging him to run again?
I'm encouraging him to focus on what's right in front of us, what I know President Biden stays up at night worrying about, which is American families, the conversations they have at night around the kitchen table about the costs they're facing, about opportunity, about their kids' futures. This legislation that we're moving through today in the Senate is about those sorts of things. Combating climate change for our kids and our grandkids, reducing prescription drug prices for our families and our parents. That's the sort of thing that President Biden is focused on, and I know he's going to keep making those sorts of differences for America's families.
Senator Coons, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.
So yeah, I thought Senator Chris Coons did a good job of talking about Biden's winning streak there, and a lot of good things that Democrats have gotten done in the last week, the last month, etc. Supporting my Biden's Best Week title for the video. And then the next clip I have is another Democrat also talking about a lot of Biden's accomplishments, but this time over on Fox News Sunday, Mike Emanuel cross-examining Democratic Senator Ben Cardin with a lot of Republican and Fox News talking points about, don't raise taxes in a recession, but, we're not sure we're in a recession, but if one of the big problems we're having, and one of the things Fox News has been talking about over and over again, is inflation. Inflation. Well, how do you fight inflation? How does the Federal Reserve can fight inflation by raising interest rates, making money more expensive, taking money out of the economy. So there's less money chasing goods. That's what causes inflation, is too much money chasing too few goods, right? Too much demand, not enough supply. Well, raising taxes, that's one of the ways that the legislature can take money out of the economy. You can decrease spending, or you can raise taxes. Those are the two ways the government can take money out of the economy. And the Inflation Reduction Act, it actually increases taxes more than it increases spending, despite it being called a tax and spend plan by Fox News Sunday. It actually decreases the deficit by somewhere between $100 and $300 billion over 10 years. So by decreasing the deficit, it's taking money out of the economy. That does decrease inflation. And Ben Cardin, to his credit, this is like modern monetary theory, MMT. I've talked about it many times. It doesn't matter. Deficit spending doesn't matter so much. And if inflation starts going up, then the government has to take money out of the economy, so there's not so much money chasing the goods. The Federal Reserve can do it by raising interest rates. The Congress can do it by cutting the deficit. Biden has cut the deficit more than any president in history, from the huge spending during the pandemic that Trump and Congress both agreed to, and now this Inflation Reduction Act, which actually is more important in terms of what it does in fighting climate change and reducing drug prices, and that's more important than what it does in terms of reducing inflation, but it does by decreasing the deficit, taking money out of the economy. That is one of the ways you do reduce inflation, and that's a point Ben Cardin makes talking to Mike Emanuel on Fox News Sunday, and then also he refutes this other Republican talking point about, shouldn't Democrats now, hasn't Chuck Schumer like expended all his political capital because he passed a bill without any Republican votes? Like, the filibuster has become so like entrenched in Republicans' thoughts about how the Senate works that it's not just something that they do every now and then to like protest some like overreach by the majority or the 50 Democrats in the Senate. Now it's like, if you do anything that doesn't require 60 votes, all of a sudden we're going to retaliate. That's, what Lindsey Graham said in a tweet, and you'll see Ben Cardin respond to that in the clip. I guess I've pre-criticized, but I'll talk about maybe a little more after we watch it together over here.
Critics say, and even Senator Manchin once said, that a recession is the wrong time to raise taxes. Economists warn new spending could further aggravate supply chain issues that have been a factor for more than a year. Any concerns about that?
We're not raising taxes. What we're doing, in fact, we're reducing the deficit. So we're actually taking money out of the economy. So that's good news for the inflation. And we're dealing with the cost centers that typical families are facing in health care and energy costs. So this should be helpful to American families and should be helpful for our economy and will help us deal with the inflation.
The bill also includes $80 billion to ramp up enforcement at the IRS. Here is Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell.
American families don't want tens of thousands more IRS agents. What they'd like are more border patrol and ICE agents.
I know you're working hard at improving this very unpopular agency, but Senator, rich people have accountants and high-powered attorneys. Do you worry that ramped-up enforcement will only end up hurting middle and working-class Americans?
Well, you're right. I have worked with Republicans and Democrats to try to modernize the IRS. Most Americans pay their taxes. Most Americans have their taxes taken out from their payroll, and there's never a question of their paying their fair share of taxes. But for those that have complicated incomes, those who have high incomes, they're the ones that are escaping. It's been estimated that we have a $1 trillion leakage in tax collections every year. I think most Americans want a level playing field. They want to pay their taxes, but they want everyone else paying their taxes. So I think this is a fair situation. The IRS desperately needs help, and this bill gives them the help they need.
Let me follow up there. Can you understand how 87,000 new IRS agents would scare the heck out of millions of Americans?
Millions of Americans aren't going to be impacted by that other than getting better service from the IRS, having their telephone answered, getting the questions they need in order to comply with our tax laws. The auditing is going to be focused on those of high income, the large corporations, et cetera. So there's no reason to be fearful. And if you have paid your taxes and if you comply with our laws, you should want to make sure everyone else does that.
Okay. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans are warning about retaliation for this Democrat-only package. Senator Lindsey Graham tweeting the following: a word of advice to those who support this reconciliation deal. If you expect the CR, the continuing resolution, to deliver a political payoff with 60 votes, you might want to rethink. Did Senator Schumer just blow all of his political capital?
Let me say this. Doing all these bills by reconciliation is not the right way to do it. The Republicans did it in 2017 on the tax bill. We are obligated to use this process because we can't get Republicans to work with us on fundamental issues such as energy, climate, and health care costs. But it'd be much better if we could have a process where we work together and have the richness of every member participating in the process, bipartisan process. That's what I do in legislation that I have worked with Republicans to get to the finish line. That's what we did in regards to the NATO accession with Finland and Sweden. That's what we did in regards to our veterans. That's what we did in regards to the infrastructure bill. That's what we did in regards to the CHIPS and Science bill. We have a good record of working together. Let's work together for the American people, and let's not threaten that we're going to shut down government or do things that are wrong. Let's figure out ways that we can work together.
Okay, as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I want to get you.
And then he moves on to the Taiwan question, and I'm going to get to a foreign relations question in a minute. But I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, except for I talked about the raising taxes in a recession, even though it's raising taxes on corporations that don't pay taxes by making the corporate minimum tax 15% on corporations that make over $1 billion in revenue. That is wildly popular with the American people. Actually, almost everything in this bill, cutting the cost of prescription drugs, wildly popular. Even fighting climate change is very popular with the American people. The one thing that might not be popular that I've seen Fox News is totally perseverating on, and you saw it in the questioning there from Mike Emanuel, is this increase in enforcement agents by the IRS, because of course the IRS is not a popular agency. No one likes the tax collector, right? But the talking point they've been using on Fox News, they're coming after the middle class with these extra enforcement agents, and the reason is because rich people have like all the lawyers and accountants, so they must be coming after the middle class. But that is totally the point of increasing enforcement, the spending on enforcement at the IRS, because rich people have all these lawyers and accountants. Well, the IRS needs a whole bunch of people too, who they can pay to like counteract the money that rich people spend on lawyers and accountants. And I also like what Ben Cardin said about, most people, their taxes are like taken out of their paychecks, and all they have to do is like file what they've already paid. Basically, it's rich people who are getting away with murder by that $1 trillion worth of leakage he was talking about. And he also made the point that I was talking about, the modern monetary theory point, that if you are cutting the deficit, if you are passing a bill that takes more in taxes than it spends, that means you're taking money out of the economy, which should reduce inflation to the extent that what Congress does even affects inflation, which is actually not the biggest contributor to the inflation that the United States and much of the world is experiencing, which has to do with the backlash from COVID and the inability to meet the demand after the big economic inactivity during COVID, and a whole bunch of, the low interest rates. And anyway, I've talked about that ad nauseum in previous live streams. But Mike Emanuel, he was like somewhat of a cross-examiner when talking to a Democrat, but I had to show this like incredible softball question to a former United Nations representative from the Trump administration, Nikki Haley. This is on another big win for the Biden administration this week. They killed the head of Al-Qaeda, who was like out on the balcony in Kabul, and on Fox News they've been, they mention how he killed the head of Al-Qaeda, but it means Al-Qaeda is back in Afghanistan, and you'll hear Nikki Haley say that. But Mike Emanuel's question here is like the worst softball question. Even like Nikki Haley, the Republican, has to give some credit to the Biden administration for killing Ayman al-Zawahiri in Afghanistan. The question is like a total Republican propaganda setup. Like, even if you kill the head of Al-Qaeda, those Muslims are like cockroaches, and they just like come out of the woodwork, and so what does it matter? Well, I mean, it's not quite that bad, not that Islamophobic, but well, you judge for yourself. And this clip I wanted to share with you about the killing of how Fox News is trying to put a negative spin on the Biden administration killing the head of Al-Qaeda over here.
Up on Afghanistan, the president says this week that the U.S. has killed 9/11 plotter Ayman al-Zawahiri in an airstrike. But isn't the grim reality that if you kill one terror leader, they're like cockroaches? There could be thousands more ready to step into that position?
You can bet on it, Mike. Zawahiri was a great win for the intelligence community and a great win for the Biden administration. I mean, we should always let these terrorists know that we don't forget. You kill thousands of our Americans, we're going to hunt you down and we're going to make sure we find you. And so I think that's great. But what this is very telling is if you're standing, you know, comfortable and free on a balcony, you can bet there are other terrorists all over Afghanistan. Mark my words, had we never had that blunder in Afghanistan, we would not be having the war you're seeing in Ukraine. We would not have al-Qaeda terrorists sitting there running free in Afghanistan. We would not have China showing the arrogance that they're showing over Taiwan. This all happened because of how America showed weakness. Now we have to find our strength, and we better get to work, and we better get to work soon.
This week, the Senate voted nearly unanimously to vote for NATO expansion to include...
Yeah, so, Nikki Haley is definitely running for president. In fact, Mike Emanuel asked her later if she would run for president, even if Trump ran for president, even though back in April 2021, she said she wouldn't run for president if Trump was running for president. But apparently now she still will run, and but she was not impressed by any of the things that were uncovered by the January 6th committee hearings. But anyway, I think I pretty much proved my point that Mike Emanuel offered a really softball question to the Republican after trying to cross-examine Senator Ben Cardin about the Inflation Reduction Act. This next clip, though, is the best cross-examination. As I promised earlier, Margaret Brennan is cross-examining Rick Scott about some other good news for Democrats and the Biden administration, that some really crazy Republicans have made it as through the primaries to be the Republican nominees for Senate, especially in Arizona and Georgia, which Margaret Brennan does a really good job of asking Rick Scott about. And Rick Scott is the head of the RSCC, the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee. So his job is to get all the Republicans nominated for Senate elected to the Senate. And even he can't defend Herschel Walker in Georgia, or what's this guy, Masters in Arizona, and some of the crazy things they've said and done. And kudos to Margaret Brennan for trying to get him to... she points out that he said some time ago that when you look at your candidates for Senate, it's like your business and you should be deciding who do you want to hire. And Margaret Brennan just goes to town on that in the best cross-examination clip of the week over here.
In a local radio interview in July, you talked a lot about your business as an executive, and you said we should start electing people that we would hire. In Georgia, Herschel Walker, Republican Senate candidate, has lied about the number of children he has, about his business dealings. His ex-wife said he held a gun to her head and said, "I'm going to blow your effing brains out." In Arizona, the candidate Blake Masters called the Unabomber an underrated thinker. He said that al-Qaeda doesn't actually pose substantial threat to Americans. I mean, I've got a list of candidates here who've had some and said some pretty troubling things. Would you hire these people to work for you?
Well, you'd go through each person, but I'm not the one doing it. It's the voters of those states are doing it. The voters of those states are going to make a choice.
You're trying to help Senate Republicans and lead them to victory. These are your candidates.
So, Margaret, as you remember, the voters in Arizona choose who they're going to vote, and what they're going to choose is they're going to choose between Blake Master and Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly has voted to keep the border open. He's never voted for border security. He's voted for the tax increases. He's voted for cutting Medicare. He's voted with Chuck Schumer and with Joe Biden basically 100% of the time. Warnock's got the same problem. This election is going to be about Joe Biden. And so this election is going to be about all the bad things that have happened. The fact that we're going into a recession, the fact that inflation's at 9%, the fact that gas prices are up $2, all these things. That's what people are looking at.
But these are your Senate Republican candidates. These are your candidates.
And the voters of each of these states. The voters of these states are going to decide if they're going to hire. Now, I get to vote. I get to vote in Florida, and that's how I think about it. but the voters in those states will choose in those states who they want. And it's a choice between two people. But you look, all the Democrat nominees are basically Biden clones.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and by the way, they won't campaign with Biden.
But if you are, I mean, you would acknowledge that if somebody went in for an interview for a private corporation, these things would come up as red flags to HR. So it's just
Biden is not campaigning with anybody because he's toxic. That's how the voters think. That's why they say 72% of Americans say the economy's in the wrong track. When that happens, people say, I'm going to take a serious look at somebody else, right? And our candidates have to go tell them what they're going to do, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows exactly who the Democrats are. That's what's going to happen all across the country, and we're going to have races, and we'll see what happens.
Are you advising all?
And then Margaret Brennan follows up with a question about whether the candidates that Rick Scott is endorsing as the head of the DSCC should accept the results of their elections. And he goes into how his election was contested and no one should accept their election until after they contest it. But I thought Margaret Brennan did a good job of at least bringing up some of the crazy things that Herschel Walker and what's his name, Mike McMaster said about the 2020 election and others. Georgia's Herschel Walker and Arizona. Blake McMaster. Blake Masters. Blake Masters is the Arizona Senate candidate who hopefully will lose to Mark Kelly, and then Herschel Walker will hopefully lose to Raphael Warnock. And I mean, it's looking more and more likely like the Democrats can hold on to the Senate and maybe even the House, because the Republicans have gone so crazy and there's been such good news for the Democrats and Biden just in the last week. But if you're not just content to talk about 2022, I also want to give you a back and forth on who should run for president in 2024. Here you have Lindsey Graham this is like the runner-up for cross-examination at, CBS News' Face the Nation, one with Margaret Brennan's cross-examination of Rick Scott I just showed you. But Dana Bash did a pretty good job with Lindsey Graham, showing him what he said late at night on January 6th, actually early morning, January 7th, about how his journey with Trump was over, but he still supports Trump in 2024. And then you can contrast that with the cross-examination of Richard Blumenthal about Biden in 2024. And anyway, I will talk about that clip a little more with you after we watch it. This is the penultimate Newsmaker clip that we will watch together tonight, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Just each of you we talk about each of your political parties, look forward to 2024. Senator Graham, you said that you want Donald Trump to run again in 2024. Yeah. I want to play for our viewers what happened late in the night on January 6th on the Senate floor.
Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. I hate it being this way. Oh my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see, all I can say is count me out. Enough is enough.
So why now do you think Trump has the character to be president again?
Well, I think he was a consequential president. If you compare his policies to what's going on today, I think he's got a hell of a story to say. That speech was about, I'm going to certify the election. Here's some things I don't believe. I don't believe the Taliban when they say they didn't know Zawahiri was in Kabul. I don't believe Mayorkas when he says the border's secure. I don't believe the election was stolen, and I don't believe this new bill is going to lower inflation. That's where I'm at.
You don't believe the election was stolen. Do you want Donald Trump, if he is looking ahead to 2024, to stop saying that?
I think we should look at election integrity measures to make sure some problems don't happen again. But if he runs for president, talking about 2020 is not what people want to hear. He likes hearing it, but people want to hear about how can you secure a broken border? How can you stop rampant crime? What can you do to get the economy back on its feet? And how can you make it safer again? How can you stop Putin from going further? What would you do with China? That's what people want to hear. And here's the good news for Republicans. Based on the performance of the Biden administration, we're in the game at a level I never dreamed of. It's not so much about people liking us. People are looking for an alternative to what's going on.
I want to ask Senator Blumenthal about his potential candidate, but it sounds like you're saying point blank, Donald Trump, please stop saying the 2020 election was overturned.
I'm telling President Trump, if you want to be president in 2024, focus on solving the problems Americans are living with.
Senator Blumenthal, President Biden says that he intends to run for re-election in 2024. You've heard there's not exactly unanimity in your party. People like Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney said that she doesn't think he will run. Congressman Dean Phillips says he doesn't want him to run. Do you think President Biden is the best candidate in 2024?
I'm going to be very blunt and very honest with you. My focus is totally on this November, partly because I am running for re-election, but also I think this November is going to determine how successful President Biden is in the next 2 years and how strong he would be as a candidate. We need to elect more Democratic senators to assure that he can appoint judges, he can achieve pro-choice legislation, he can continue the forward momentum of the economy, lower inflation. We are making tremendous progress. The Inflation Reduction Act is just one example. The Veterans Burn Pits legislation, which I helped to lead, very important.
And I'm going to ask you about that in 1 second, but your non-answer is going to likely be perceived as an intentional dodge. You won't say, yes, I support President Biden. Is that where you want it to be?
I will support President Biden.
Do you want him to run?
If he decides he wants to run, and I think his decision will be determined by how November ends for the Democratic Party and for senators like myself who are running for re-election.
I will not support President Biden.
You didn't need to say that.
If Trump runs, I would support him.
But, Senator Blumenthal brought up something important, which is we've been talking about a lot of bipartisan accomplishments. The two of you have been a big part of it, but so is.
So I don't know. I think that Senator Blumenthal's defense of Biden was a lot more credible than Lindsey Graham trying to walk back what he said early in the morning of January 7th about President Trump at that time. I don't know why I got the hiccups all of a sudden, but I do want to end the show with this newsmaker clip I promised earlier. This, I believe, is Stacey Abrams, the candidate to be governor of Georgia this year. Hiccups, what can I do? Talking about how the position on reproductive justice, reproductive freedom, bodily autonomy for women is not an extreme position. The Roe framework is really just giving women the right to choose in the first trimester, and then sort of in the second trimester there's equal weight to the woman's choice and the state's interest in the developing fetus, and then the third trimester it's got to be medical necessity. And maybe I can get rid of these hiccups while we watch Stacey Abrams make the most reasonable discussion of the position on a woman making a choice about abortion in consultation with her doctor, without politicians getting in the way over in this clip.
I want to get some clarity on your position specifically, because you've said this. I want to put up what you said very recently on your abortion position. You said this: my intention is going to be to pass legislation that says a woman has the right to an abortion, and that right continues until a physician determines the fetus is viable outside of the body, except in the case of protecting the woman's life or health. How do you put legislation around that?
You put legislation around that by returning to what we know was the structural framework of Roe v. Wade. You do it by not setting arbitrary gestational limits because we know that those rarely actually reflect medical decision making. This is a medical decision. And when we give it back to doctors, when we tell women and their doctors to make these choices, what we are saying is we respect the responsibility that women have and the obligation that doctors have, but that politicians are not scientists, and that we should not be setting into law these moving targets that do not reflect the reality that women face when they're sitting in that doctor's office.
Look, the person on the right who wants to see some restrictions on abortion is going to argue that even though you're not saying you're for abortion all the way up to the end of, that essentially that law would allow abortion all the way up to the end of a pregnancy. Would you want to have legislation to put guardrails on that?
The guardrails are holding the physician accountable. And that's the place where I think we've gotten a bit far afield. There is no woman who at 8 months has not cherished the notion of this pregnancy. If you have conversations with women, you know that that is one of the most difficult moments. And the reality is that to put an arbitrary date in a law devalues the pain and the tragedy of that moment. A doctor is not going to take an action that is not medically required. And what we are saying is that this is a medical decision. I understand that there are those who would feel better if we plucked a date out of the air, but we know that that is not scientifically supportable. But we also know that the tragedy of exceptions, you cannot write every exception into the law, and that is where we find ourselves today in Georgia. Brian Kemp does not permit these exceptions to be real. And in a state where we have 82 counties without an OBGYN, 64 counties without a surgeon, 18 counties without a family doctor, and 9 without a doctor at all, setting arbitrary limits that are not grounded in the reality of what women face is deeply problematic and ultimately cruel.
So this is where, I mean, you're having a science conversation and a medical conversation, which is the conversation most women are having.
So yeah, kudos to Stacey Abrams there for really explaining the medical necessity argument. I still have the hiccups. I don't know why, but I mean, women don't have abortions in the last trimester unless there's some, like, really, and doctors don't perform them unless there's some really pressing medical necessity. So I wanted to make that point before I finished. I also want to thank my Super Chat contributors here. Thank you, Lulu Girl, Tom Trask, and Clip Culture. You know, a lot of times my videos get demonetized, not for hiccuping, but for controversial issues, I guess. Wouldn't it be funny if they actually demonetized me for hiccuping? Well, I should probably try to finish this live stream and do something about these hiccups. But thank you all for joining me, and I will be back next Monday and every Monday at least through the November midterms. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.